Welcome to the Whiskey Congress. Honest, open talk dedicated to speaking the truth to those who are open to hearing it. Black, white, right, left. Most importantly, honest, bold, and fueled by good whiskey. In Whiskey Veritas, we are Whiskey Congress. Join the evolution.
Whiskey Congress is back in session. Stephen and I are together in the Cleveland studio following 2 weeks of nothing but Southern California-like weather. It's been good in that regard, and the country's going fucking crazy. We have fires like taking out airports. We didn't even put that on the board, but
yeah, I mean those Canadian fires are wild. I mean, I guess the interesting thing is, forest fires happen, but it's just amazing how just everybody is politicizing these fires, right? Like, so the people on the left, this is climate change. It's happening in your face. I'm like, well, I mean, like, yeah, but
I would not disagree with that.
I don't know how these fires started, right? We don't know. Like, I mean, I know people are saying, but it's a matter of
how their scale and.
But I don't know, man. Like, if some dipshit was in the woods and starts a fire that gets out of control, like, that's not climate change.
It gets more out of control if there's no groundwater causing plants to stop a fire.
I guess, but like maybe, right? Like
I derail this, but
no. I mean, it's a valid conversation. Look, I'm not saying I agree. There's something going on with the climate, right? I will never claim that I can tell you exactly what it is. I'm not a climate scientist. I don't study this. I don't care how into it you are, unless you are an actual scientist. Like I'm going to kind of give you a sideways look on this. All I'm saying is, if someone started the fire, right, like it can be dry, right? Like you can have a spell of dryness, and that doesn't necessarily infer climate change, right? Like, I mean, it happens, there's cycles and everything else. So all I'm saying, if some idiot is in the woods, starts a fire in a particular dry part of the year, and that fire spreads, and you get the shit that you have now, like, is that climate change, or is that just some idiot in the woods?
Well, it's the fire starting isn't the key point. The key point is how much
Bitch, land. The fuck it's not.
Well, because
to the person who lost their house, they're like, motherfucker, what?
It can happen naturally. A lightning strike can start fire.
Okay.
And I've actually seen, so when I lived in Florida, I saw a lightning strike caused fire. Like, I didn't see the actual strike, but it happens. The problem is when these things get out of control. And this is where neither you nor I nor 99.9% of people listening can really appreciate. But when you deal with the landscape being on fire, and it just keeps spreading and spreading and spreading, and there's not enough, like I said, not enough groundwater. The vegetation supports burning because it's so fucking dry. Look at your lawn today. Look at mine. I mentioned the Southern California weather.
I mean, it hasn't rained here in like 20 days.
Is it that long? It's been at least 2 weeks. And literally, if you took a match and flicked it out on your lawn or mine, normally I wouldn't bat an eye. If you did that today, I'd be kind of freaked out. Now, that's 20 days, and you're right. One event does not signify global change.
Right.
However...
Now, you've got shit like this. Now, to your point, what you're going to say is like when shit like this happens all the time on a recurring basis, storm of the century every year, then, okay.
It's not there.
Agreed. Like, so the truth is it's somewhere in the middle. But... Whether it's climate change or just a random series of events, what I do know is that those fires are having a major impact just globally, right? I mean, because it's impacting it's impacting our weather here, right? Like we've got warnings for air quality and everything else, and it's not as bad as what you see in New York, where it looks like an apocalyptic hellscape, but there is a haze here, right? That has been directly attributed to the smoke coming down from Canada. Yeah. We're right across the lake from Canada, right? Like, so if you take Lake Erie and you go across it, like you are technically in international waters.
You're in Canadian waters if you go too far.
Right. So, definitely having an impact.
And but to your point, it's affecting. I don't know what the right wing take is. So I know the right-wing take is just that it's not global warming and everybody calm down. It's just a fire. And, you've got the people on the left that everyone is saying, like, and
again, I think the truth is somewhere in the middle, which I know pisses people off, but like that's kind of the problem, right? Like everyone is so mad that it's not their line in the sand, but there is not, like you're talking about a country with over 300 million people, so most of the answers are going to be in the middle, and just because you don't like it or whatever, I don't really give a fuck. That's where the right answer is. And for this, like most other things, the answer is somewhere in the middle. Like we need to do something about climate change. But at the same time, like this, like just because this fire isn't like the thing that we're going to stand on to say, all right, everyone turn in your gas stoves and your gasoline cars and walk everywhere. Just stop.
And events happen. I mean, you know, in the years before industrial influence impacted the environment, bad things still happened. So I agree. Whenever someone points to a singular event, but just to add to your point, I can't wait to get to the next one. But to add to your point, it's affecting all of our lives because air travel coming out of the east coast of the United States impacts the world.
Yeah.
I mean, politically, economically, and I saw the pictures. You and I were out having lunch the other day. I looked up and went, what the fuck? And you were like, looking at me like, what's wrong with you? And then I pointed to the screen and it was like, New York City was just fog. And it's not fog; it's smoke.
Not just fog, but it was like orange.
Yeah, it was.
Right?
Yeah.
Like it definitely looked something out of Blade Runner-esque.
All right, I sorry, I kind of derailed us a bit, but it is kind of important that the world's coming to an end. No, okay, it's neither. Donald Trump is about to be indicted again on a really big fucking charge. So this is related to the mishandling or
indicted again. He hasn't been indicted.
Wasn't he indicted for the... he was indicted in New York for the... this is the second indictment.
What was the first one?
The first one was bit related to financial mishandling.
Oh, yeah. That whole thing with Alvin Bragg. Yeah, that was... And that was...
You know what? Your reaction kind of illustrates the point.
Yeah, I mean, I said that I thought that was a mistake coming out of the New York DA. Obviously, everybody... New York... Plenty of people in New York hate Trump, and the whole thing with Alvin Bragg, I thought, was a bad choice. And like you have prosecutorial discretion, it gets used all the time. This was a bad use of prosecution with that whole thing.
That was a bad use.
That was a bad use. I personally don't believe that the prosecutor has a leg to stand on when doing the overall analysis, right? Like if all you're going to say is we have to, no one is above the law. We're going to, okay. Well, then the problem is that there are multiple examples from your office where you don't pull that up.
Right.
Oh,
yeah. But the New York indictment, I agree. The politics of
is bullshit. Now, what he's being indicted for here, right, with the records and espionage, obstruction, completely different.
Yes.
Right.
First of all, it's federal.
It is federal, but like this is something now. A lot of people are saying, "Oh, Joe Biden and Hillary and blah blah." Like, listen, here's Trump's problem. Trump took the shit. Then they said, "Hey, you gotta go through different channels. You can't take it. Just give it back." Right? Literally, that might have been the phone. That might be the phone call verbatim.
As much as you were dumbing it down, for lack of a better word,
but
that might have been the actual.
The initial conversation was very much like that, right? So instead of Trump saying, "Oh yeah, my bad, man, we'll get it all together, and we'll get it back to you," right? Trump is Trump, right? Where he's got to tell you, "I'm not going to follow your rules. You can't make me follow your rules, right? And because I'm so rich, right? Nothing can apply to me. I'm so great, right?" So the feds are like, dude, come on, just give the records back, give the shit back. We'll go through it. We'll figure out what you can keep, whatever. Just give it back. Let's not make this a big deal. Trump continues to make it a big deal, lies about it, says they've got everything. They're like, but then he does it in a way where like, all right, trust but verify, taking out of Reagan's terminology. So they don't. They say, okay, great, right? His lawyers send this letter, oh, you've got everything, right? And the FBI's like, no, we don't. And sure enough, they didn't have everything, right? They didn't give him anything, and they hid stuff, and they moved it around, which is on camera, and you've got recordings of Trump, which is, look, it's not, I heard that there are recordings of Trump. It's when you literally look at the indictment, the transcripts from the recording are in the indictment, where Trump is talking about what he has and who he's talking to and what he's talking about doing with these things. Okay, where he's got things on our plans if we got into a war with Iran and different things, yes. And then he's talking about like, hey, I would show you, but I can't, and I'm sorry, you can't joke about showing or not showing records
Pentagon strategies,
right? Pentagon strategies and records on national defense and security. It's not a joking matter where you get it on tape and you've actually got the documents in hand in an unsecure location. And I'm sorry, I don't care that you've got a bunch of guards and there's a bunch of whatever, and it's all super private. And you can't. Mar-a-Lago's a fortress is the big argument. No, it's not.
The range officers are very strict there.
Yeah.
So if you take too long to putt, they're on you.
Like I'm sorry. Again, it's
I'm not.
It's a country club, folks.
I'm not asking this to put you on the spot because you're one of the very few people I know that could answer this either way. Did you read the indictment?
I did.
I was going to say that doesn't shock me from you.
Yeah, I did. Now it's a beefy one, but I felt it was worth reading.
Well, thank you, because I'm not doing it.
Because you're talking about a president, former president of the United States, right? And so when you look at and people are just like, oh well, I'm like, look, when Trump's issue, right? Because everyone's like, well, Joe Biden had. Why aren't they coming down on Joe Biden? Because Joe Biden, some of his stuff was from when he was in the Senate, right? So his stuff, like he didn't take good care of it. No reason that shit should have been in his garage in his car, right? But at the same time, they said, hey, give us the shit back. He's like, all right, look, here's access to everything I have. Go get it. Go take it. Sorry, my bad. Right? Now, whether Joe did that because he knew, because of Trump, whatever. Now, again, one of my criticisms of Biden, right, is when they got Trump on this, right, when they started making a big deal, you're the president of the United States. How do you not make a call to someone and say, hey, can we do it? Can you send the fucking intern to go do it?
I don't know that they didn't, because the Biden stuff came out pretty quickly after. I mean,
no. This is what happened. Okay. The Trump stuff comes out, right? A few months later, the Biden stuff comes out. Now, what happened was they didn't report on it until later. The reporting happened around, but they had discovered the documents around that time. I guess my point is, I guess to your point, actually what probably did happen is that all the stuff with Trump did happen. Someone from Biden said, do a sweep, make sure he's not vulnerable here. And he was. So then they cleaned it up. That's actually, now that going back to it, that's what happened. And again, going back to I fucking told you guys Biden was a pain in my ass. But anyway.
We know. Can we put that on the record?
Right? But the difference is, though, again, Trump not cooperating when they asked for the records back, Trump lying about it, Trump having his attorneys lie about it, or if Trump didn't have them, then the attorneys taking it upon themselves to lie about it. What he said on tape, right? And I'm sorry, I don't care if it was a joke. You can't joke about national security. I can't joke about being on a plane and blowing it up. I can't joke about taking a plane hostage, right? Those are just things that you can't joke about. And we've got evidence that Trump did it. I'm sorry, that's what got him here. This isn't a witch hunt. They tried to make this not a big deal. And I mean by they, I mean the DOJ, Secret Service, FBI, everybody. They tried to make this not. Trump made this a big deal by not just giving the shit back and not cooperating, right? And it's
over a period of months.
Right? Yes,
and
months.
and multiple times. So I did not read the transcripts. Like I said, I asked you because I figured it was a 50-50 or if not better that you would have. But I did see 2 interviews with people who claim to have, and they are Bill Barr and Chris Christie. Not exactly your garden variety liberals.
Nope.
And they both, Christie is obviously running against Trump, and he, he's got a motive. I'm sure the Trump's folks will be like, well, he's got an agenda. And Bill Barr, I guess you could say he has an agenda too. But both of them said this is damning. They said this is so far beyond.
Well, I mean, the problem with Bill Barr is now I don't know. Bill Barr's only thing is to maybe sell books, right?
In terms of why, what his motivation
what's his motivation?
I mean,
selling books, money.
Be a relevant talking head.
Maybe, but I mean, Bill Barr's got money, right? Bill Barr's got but Bill Barr is good, so maybe, but greed is weird.
Greed is definitely weird because no one says Gordon Gekko.
Right.
How many yachts can you water ski behind?
But, my thing, I'll take listening to both Bill. But here's the thing: if you compare what Bill Barr and Chris Christie said, right? Like they're saying very similar things. Yeah. Right, like, and they're coming to the same, and they're not that, like, they're a little bit both more articulate and eloquent with the legalese of it than I'm being right now. But we're all saying the same thing. Yeah. If you read the indictment, right, and you look at the evidence that they have, we know what, and knowing what has been collected, not even, and then there's what we haven't even seen yet. It just doesn't look good for Trump. And if you take off the partisan glasses, right, of trying to do the whataboutisms, what about Hillary and what about Joe Biden or whatever, right? Also, no one's going, what about Mike Pence? Right? Mike Pence also had documents, but no one's saying what about
Trump
him.
Trump did throw him under the bus a little bit.
Trump did, but I mean, no one, because you all, like everyone, like if you're just being common sense about it, right? Like all Trump had to do, if Trump would have given the documents back and they tried to gas him on this because there were one or two lingering documents, then I'd be like, come on, guy, what are you doing? But in this particular instance, he doesn't have a leg to stand on, right? Like, I mean, and anyone defending him at this point, you're not. I can't take you serious.
Well, fine, but here's the thing: people are defending him aggressively,
and most of them, when you see their argument, they don't have argument.
No, they don't. But they are threatening violence.
They are threatening, and I welcome it.
I have no.
Here's the thing. No. Here's. Let me tell you why. Because there's a lot of violence being thrown out by a lot of people.
Yep.
Right? By a lot of people that don't know violence. Right? And I'm getting to a point where fuck all y'all. Y'all want it? Come and get it. Don't care. Do not care.
All right.
However you want
that to me is...
And here's part of the reason why. Personally, I got a lot of shit on my plate. I've got very little patience. Right? Just in general. Personally. Right? I'm fighting an uphill battle, own business, like high stakes, right? Everything that I own is invested in this company that I'm trying to start, that I'm fighting an uphill battle. I am tired. I'm frustrated. It has nothing to do with politics. It just is what it is. So when I see some fat piece of shit fuck running his mouth about all the things that violent men do. Some dude who can't touch his toes and hasn't seen his dick in 20 fucking years, talking about all the hell he's gonna rain down. Fuck you, you fat bitch. I'm gonna show you violence in a very, very violent, mean way. And I know that's not rational, it's not civil, but fuck you people. Honestly, because you talk all this shit about all these things and you haven't been through anything. Right? You're not tested. You don't have any fucking metal, but you're going to sit here and threaten violence and civil war and all this other stuff. Get the fuck out of here. You people don't know violence. You don't know any of the shit that you are threatening. And if you did, it would be over before you realize what the fuck happened. So, you want to bring it? Bring it. Otherwise, shut the fuck up with all this violence talk.
Well,
because everybody's going to punch a Nazi in the face, but when the motherfuckers are protesting pride parades and they're just out and about, I see no face punching happening. Everybody's really threatening to punch Nazis, right, left, conservative, whatever, but no one's punching Nazis. I call all of your bullshit.
Well, okay, but we've seen too many violent acts by people who are deranged based on politics. This isn't punching Nazis, it's not anti-pride. We've had shootings in my hometown and all.
But those are different than these.
Well, right. Some of them are motivated by this kind of thing. There's a lot of and look, I agree with you.
But those are like what happened in Buffalo. Like that kid was way different, right?
Like right. But it was motivated by race and violence.
Now, if you want to go to the fucker that tried to take down the FBI in Cincinnati and ran his ass into a cornfield,
that did not go well.
Now look, it didn't go well, but that's still scary and violent and risky.
And here's the thing: we have never had in my lifetime that I can recall a political figure literally saying, "They're stealing your country from you. I am your only savior. If you don't protect me, we're going to lose our country." And have people go, "Oh yeah, I'm on your side." That's never happened in my lifetime. I'm older than you. That's happening now. Literally, you've got this guy who's he's facing indictment. He's in a sane world.
But here's my other thing too, though. Right? What did you say early on, like when we were talking about the fires? You're like, the world's coming to an end. It's all...
Yeah.
Here's the thing. we're going it is obvious we are going down a bad, dangerous road, and we are getting closer and closer to the point where the only things that fix it are either some sort of complete, breakdown and civil war type thing, or aliens come out of the sky and we're unified like an Independence Day.
Which is, by the way, if you follow the Las Vegas story.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is just like, give me what, something happened, right? Like, alien, just come on. Like, what are you guys waiting on? Like, just come on, right? Either conquer us, right? Or let us defeat you, or we defeat, or something, but like, why are we doing this? Anyway,
all right.
But to the point, like, you're right. They are threatening violence. Nobody wants that. That's bad. We should all be civil. But like, no one's respecting the rules of civil engagement at all, right? Like, you can't, right? Like, I mean, and it's mostly the people on the right that are just like, Twitter has become. It's just, and it's been like this, a cesspool for a long time. But now there are no restraints on, lies and bullshit and conspiracy theories and hate and fear mongering, and they essentially turned down the extreme voices from the left who were previously amplified, right? Like, I mean, if you signed up for Twitter 2 years ago, then all your suggested, here's people you should follow. We're all, AOCs and whoever.
Nancy Pelosi.
What's the
Young Turks.
The Young Turks and what is that podcast that blew podcasts up? Pod Save America.
Okay.
Stuff like that. Like, that was like, everyone, no matter who they were, no matter what they said they liked, they got a shit ton of left-leaning, progressive, liberal, Democrat people to follow. Right now, you get on Twitter and it's all these no-name, literally people that have. When you look them up, there's no background, there's no history, there's nothing. They don't even have websites.
So you have 2 followers, but
no. They have hundreds of thousands, tens, 20, 100,000 followers, but they don't even have a website. Maybe they have a YouTube channel, but there's no paper trail to who these people are. They just have a fuck ton of followers and a fuck ton of influence on Twitter. Right, maybe some of them on Facebook or TikTok or some other social media, but they don't have websites. They don't have job histories that you could track down. Who is this person? Where do they come from? What's their they're just social media influencers that literally blew up out of nowhere overnight. Right, they've only been on Twitter for 2 or 3 years.
I mean, that's how QAnon started in a sense. Right? I mean, not quite the same because
QAnon's different.
They have their own channel and stuff.
Yeah, they came up with but my point is that's where Twitter is now. It's hard. I used to get a lot of news from Twitter. Breaking news, things like that, and because you had all your different newspapers and media outlets, but most of them, because they've been deemed liberal media or whatever, they don't have the same presence on Twitter. So now you see something that says breaking news. I saw something the other day that I had to comment on, breaking news, right? But the breaking news was the people the Trump crazies were calling Ron DeSantis' wife Target Melania or something like that, Target the store, Melania.
Okay.
She was a cheap knockoff version of Melania Trump.
Oh, Target, okay.
Target, yeah.
Okay.
Target brand.
Well, I thought you meant crosshairs.
No.
Because that's happening too with...
Yes, but no. But my point is that tweet got hundreds, thousands of retweets, quotes, likes, right? But that was, literally they put breaking news and it blows up and it's this isn't even news. What is this? This is nothing. This is stupid, right? And trying to find, even trying to get news from Twitter, it's not the same. So now I've got to go back to Google. I've got to go to very direct targeted sources. There's not a good quality aggregator of news anymore. And Twitter was that for a while, but it's not that anymore because it's become this bastion of far right conspiracy theory bullshit, right? You just scroll through and you have to be very selective to avoid that. Now I get good sports takes, right? You could find good stuff on sports. that may be about it. Like the rest of the shit on Twitter now,
you're way more active on Twitter than I am.
I mean, because it used to be a really good source for a lot of good information from around the world, right? Like especially there were a lot of great reporters from the Middle East, Al Jazeera. Like giving you like a more realistic version of what was going on. Some of the stuff down at the border. There's like all sorts of. But now, like you just have to dig so deep to find that stuff, and what you have to cut through is all like I said, and they flipped it, and part of this is on the former, top dogs at Twitter, Jack Dorsey, and others for being so progressive and being like instead of being like straight down the middle, right? At least being consistent with how they, it's like look, if you're going to be shitty to the far right, you need to be shitty to the far left or whatever. And I get everyone's there's no such thing as danger on the left. Like
no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that when you say we need to promote the far right, far left, what the voices that are lacking are the sane moderates.
No, I didn't. What did I say? I said if you're going to push back on one, then you need to push back on the other.
Agree with that. Push back. I'm sorry.
Right, like if you're pushing, because they were
for platform one, platform the other. I'm like, right? Tell them to shut the fuck up.
That's exactly what I'm saying. They spent too much time trying to boost the left before, right? That it alienated people on the right, and rightfully so. Because even if you're in the middle, right? Even if you're a center-right person, right? You're not extreme one way or the other. Fiscally conservative, you're religious, whatever. But you're not one of these zealots. If you got people, like things that you don't necessarily agree with, but don't bother you, but they're being shoved down your face in every way, like then all of a sudden, like that's how you turn people into zealots, right? To a degree,
sure,
right? And I think there was a lot of in your face from the left. On social media, specifically on Twitter, that drove people nuts. Elon Musk, being the opportunist that he is, saw it and said, fine, I'll buy it and I'll make money off of it. I'll turn it into a place for these people. They'll worship me, right? And I'll get them to pay for it. And he did.
All right. And a perfect example of what you're saying, you and I go back and forth every now and then about, Joe Rogan is a right-winger. No, he's not. But he got pushed so hard by the left and they said a bunch of shit that wasn't true. He comes back and says, fuck you, Don Lemon. I didn't take horse tranquilizer. In his words, I can afford human medicine, bitch, I believe were his words. But Don Lemon stuck to his thing, and he's like, fuck you, I'm not backing down. And now it's suddenly Joe Rogan versus CNN. He's a right-wing operative, and I got to deal with my comedy friends going, Joe Rogan's really changed. I'm like, he really hasn't. And I don't blanket defend the guy because he's done some really dumb stuff and said some dumb stuff. But he is what he is, and yet he became a figurehead for pushing back.
I was never a big fan of Joe Rogan. His show was okay in small doses. There was nothing that really blew me away. I think at times he got some very captivating guests. He did a good job of letting those people speak, tell their story, and bringing out like a more relatable side to them, which is good. I wasn't a fanboy of everything that he did. A lot of the stuff that for a lot of people who are fans of his that they believe are like, oh man, he's in such a good shape. All this other stuff. Like, dude, I live in a world of fitness. Like, Joe Rogan is not unique in that regard to me, right? Like, but and that's impressive, right? I mean, it is impressive, but again, like, it's just a world that I live in. So it's like, all right, that's kind of the norm in the world that I live in. And I like his shift to the right to me isn't that big of a deal because I mean that's just like guys like him, that's kind of the thing, right? And it's not. I don't think it's not. It is what it is. Like I didn't put a lot of stake in him before. Like this shift isn't that big of a surprise to me.
And I'm pushing back that it's not really a shift in where he stands. As
some of it is directly like he's even like there are clips where he said my opinion on this has changed because of
right all right
you know what I mean, like when he says that, like I don't what the fuck else am I supposed to call it?
I'm not saying he hasn't changed positions on things. I'm saying that he's not suddenly a right wing darling who's going to. He
is a right wing darling, but it's not
not by design.
He's not. Choose it like right, like I mean, he's playing into it though a little bit for good reason, for money, but at the same time, again, it's not him, right? It's he was driven a certain way because of the left's reaction to something that he did, right? Which I think that their reaction was ridiculous, right? But then I think his reaction has also been...
I don't think he handled it well.
Right.
All right.
But it didn't change. It doesn't really change my opinion on him, though.
And nor mine. And yet I know so many people who said, oh, he's totally flipped. So I was kind of trying to like play into what you were saying about how when you get attacked by one side, your pushback now gets taken as you're on the other side. Let me give an even more stark example. When Mitt Romney stood up to Trump, and a bunch of the people on the left were like, Mitt Romney's one of us now. I'm like, no, he's not. He's a stodgy, dopey, douchey conservative. He's just not a psychopath, and he actually has to make his, his brain actually works. He's like, I've stood for these things for this many years. I'm not changing my path. And yet people on the left suddenly embrace this guy like he's going to be, marching in the pro-choice parade.
Well, I mean, same thing with Liz Cheney, right?
Yes.
I mean, and
yes,
right,
exactly.
And my thing with Liz Cheney is, I'm like, look, to be fair, you were just like, well, Liz Cheney's terrible, blah blah blah, and I'm like, yeah, but is she? How? Like, my thing with that was like, is she really? Do we know? Like, do we actually know what her voting record is on certain things? Do we actually know, or are we just saying she's terrible because her dad is Dick Cheney, which is fair.
It's actually, I understand.
Right? Like, I mean, which is fair, but it was the same thing with her. There were people like, oh, well, Liz Cheney needs to run for president, and I would vote for her. I'm like, does she really? Do you really? Are you sure?
And I stood by, politically, nothing, she and I would agree on almost nothing, but she actually, has a conscience and,
I don't even know if she has a conscience. I think she just has common sense.
Okay.
Right? Or at least
she's a sentient human being.
Right.
Unlike a lot of this. I want to move on from Trump other than to say the word that's not, you used it a couple times, it doesn't get used enough, is espionage. I'm going to try to make this hyperbolic and throw you into a bad spot, and I'm admitting I'm doing it so that doesn't make me a bad person, but if this happened in 1900, a president in 1900 tries to organize a coup, it fails, and he is then found to have government documents that could compromise our national security. What happens?
I mean, he'd be hung, for sure.
Okay,
that's probably hung or in prison. But so with the espionage thing, with the espionage aspect of the whole Trump indictment, people are just like, oh, that's too far. One, read the Espionage Act and what it says, right? And people are like, oh, well, he declassified the documents. They're not. Doesn't matter. The Espionage Act actually doesn't say anything about confidential or classified documents. It actually doesn't. It just says anything pertaining to, national security or anything that, if it fell into the wrong hands, could be damaging to the United States. Doesn't say anything about things, whether they have to be classified or declassified or whatever, right? So again, we have Trump's own words. This isn't secondhand someone telling me what Trump said. These are his words, the transcripts from things that he said that have been recorded and are now a part of the indictment, right? So based on what he said, he had documents that, if fell into the wrong hands, could be very dangerous to the United States and are, things that we're going after in other places, okay? So based off the definition and the words provided in the Espionage Act and Trump's own words based off what he had and what he was doing with them, he violated the act, folks. Sorry. Right? This isn't I know it sounds crazy and dramatic because of the word espionage or whatever, but they actually wrote it aggressively broad, in my opinion, and Trump figured out a way to trip and fall all the way into this net. Right? You compare the act, you look at the indictment, you look at the transcripts, the words that Donald Trump said. Right? That's the killer, right?
Yeah.
That's a big nail in the coffin. It may not be the nail that closes the casket and then starts the dirt on top, but it's not good. Right? He put himself in this position. People want to say it's a wild goose hunt and he's being persecuted and this is all okay. Well, one, he did this. Two, he did this.
Yeah. All right, so who's going to go down with him, if anyone? Because the name that I'm hearing is that Jim Jordan has aggressively tried to prevent this so diligently that he might in fact himself be charged. I saw an interview that said that was going to happen. This will be published before that potentially happens on Tuesday. Just putting it out there.
That would be tough. I mean, because Jim Jordan would have had to have been directly involved. I don't think he could be, unless Jim Jordan was like Trump was giving Jim Jordan the documents and Jim Jordan was shopping him around.
I think it was more about preventing the investigation into the documents.
But it wouldn't be that then what would happen is there would be a separate indictment of Jim Jordan for obstruction, but it wouldn't be. It would be obstructing this investigation.
Yes.
Into them investigating Trump for his holding onto the documents. So that would be whole
It'd be a separate proceeding. Separate. But
it could happen.
I saw an interview with someone I forget who it was, but someone that is generally reliable saying it was going to. I want to put it out there because this will be published on Sunday the 11th, which is also being recorded on Sunday the 11th. Let's see what happens on Tuesday the 13th.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see it happening, but I mean,
all right. I don't know if this is worth a Steve and Jim bet or not. I'm not diehard on this. I just know that we've had our history of bets.
Yeah.
All right, man. You've got Biden bribery on there. Are we talking about the Hunter Biden videos?
No,
or not videos, photos.
I mean, all right. Marjorie Taylor Greene and her whole clan have been saying, "Oh, Biden took a $5 million bribe." Right, and we've got evidence of it. Well, the evidence is, a Rudy Giuliani associate told investigators that someone told him that Joe Biden was offered $5 million and accepted the $5 million. But the problem is that you've got Rudy Giuliani telling the investigators to go talk to this guy who heard from another guy. Like, that's literally what the evidence is.
I know a guy who knows a guy.
That's literally what the evidence is. And they're like, all right, this isn't evidence. This is word of mouth, whatever. Right? And I've said all along, if you've got evidence of Joe Biden accepting bribes while he was in office to further the cause of okay, go after him. Right?
Yeah.
But just make sure that you've got the proof. Make sure that it's rock solid and that there is no arguing or debating it whatsoever. Right? Like that's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, the one whistleblower disappeared.
Well, because it wasn't a whistleblower. Like Trump was paying him. I have no reason to well, I shouldn't say that. You root for the president to be successful and win, whether he's a Democrat or a Republican, because it's what's good for the country.
Right.
Right. I don't like Joe Biden. I don't think that again, I've said this. I feel like I say it every fucking week.
I do too.
But in this particular instance, the whole bribery thing, I think, is bullshit. Right, like the fact that you're saying that it's not even secondhand, right? Like the rules of evidentiary procedure say that this couldn't even be introduced as testimony, right? Based off what we know, the evidence of Joe Biden taking this bribe is. So but Marjorie Taylor Greene doesn't care, doesn't know what the rules of procedure are and whatever. So she's going to say that she saw evidence and she took notes and blah, blah, blah. So all this it's just
a guy talked to me yesterday. He told me that Marjorie Taylor Greene murders children to stay young.
Wait, what?
I'm making shit up too.
Oh.
But I mean, first of all, people said that about Hillary and Jack Wagons bought it and one guy...
People are still saying that. Like, it's a whole big thing.
So now I'm telling you...
Adrenochrome, people are drinking kids' bloods to stay young.
I'm telling you that I heard from a guy who heard from a guy that Marjorie Taylor Greene is, in fact, the ringleader of that organization. I can't prove it, but I think we should investigate. The pain that's viewing...
He wasn't serious.
Everyone knows I'm being a jackass on purpose. Everyone knows that.
Please,
I just said
a little faster with that, just because.
No.
Here's the thing,
No.
Here's the problem, right? You want to draw your line in the sand. If they don't have to play by the rules, I don't have to play by the rules. Okay, fine. Nobody's playing by the rules, which then guys like me say, fine, we'll play by my rules. Right? And you don't want to play by the rules. She don't want to play by the rules. Fine, we're going to play by my rules, and my rules are we play for blood. But nobody wants. Then all of a sudden, now I'm the crazy one.
Yeah.
Right now, now I'm the crazy.
You're the bad guy.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I acknowledge I was making shit up. So there's that. All right. And in the rest of the world, you've got China and Taiwan are pushing buttons. China's pushing our buttons a bit. They're driving, international waters. There have been a few. To call them a near miss maybe is a bit dramatic, but there's clearly been a bit of high seas chicken getting played, and that makes me uncomfortable.
It does, and Taiwan scrambles their fighter jets, and look, a lot of people are like, oh, well, Joe Biden, like, look, Joe Biden doesn't have, like, China really didn't care who the president of the United States was, right? Like, they knew that they had us in a position of power, or they had a position of power over us, probably 15, 20 years ago, realized that, started maneuvering, right? Like, which is what, like, China started buying up Africa, 15, 20 years ago. Then they started moving into India. They started making, inroads in with the Russia US. And everything. I mean, obviously they invested heavily in the U.S., in real estate, in land, buildings, all this other stuff. They've been sending people, like, China's been doing this forever, right? Like, for the last couple decades at least. They've kicked it into overdrive. I think they really kicked it into overdrive when Trump got into office. People say, "Oh, well, they were scared of Trump." Like, no, they just said, "All right, fuck you."
Knew how to play him.
They played him. They knew it, and then when they didn't need him anymore, they shut him out, right? And then they just felt that they don't have a real use for Biden anymore. They don't care, and so now they're just not communicating with us at all, and doing what they were going to do. Didn't matter if it was Trump or Jesus in the White House. Like, this is China's plan all along. They're trying to replace U.S. currency as the top dog in the world as it comes to currency. They are working on a peace agreement with Russia and Ukraine. We'll see how that goes. But if they're able to pull off a peace agreement with Russia and Ukraine, they're able to then pull in some of these other people that are kind of caught in the middle, right? But they feel like, well, U.S. couldn't do this, but China could. So maybe it's time to start to pony up to China. Right, and China owns a bunch of U.S. debt as it is anyway, and China's starting to, stabilize currency with all these other countries. I don't know, maybe that's the way to go. Then they go, and then what do we do?
Well, they also have the ability to. So we are one of their biggest consumers. I think we are their biggest consumer. But when you're a consumer, they have the ability to shut off your consumption.
Well, yeah,
that's a scary thing.
We saw that during COVID, right? It's just like, what's the word? Supply chain issues. Supply chain issues. The supply chain was that there wasn't a supply chain. We got everything from China. Then China shut down. We couldn't get anything. That was,
okay.
If you have a supply chain, you've got multiple sources and everything else, but we had one source.
Microchip production was essentially shut off, and suddenly Ford couldn't put a truck on the dealership floor.
Yeah, cars, computers, all sorts of stuff. I mean, it was huge. I couldn't get a 3D printer because of this, right? Like, literally, like a 3D construction printer I couldn't get because I couldn't get the right chips and all that other shit to put into it. So obviously there's a huge impact there. We have to be paying attention, but I don't know what the solution is.
I not only don't know what the solution is, I also don't know what the flip side is, because if China were to try to flip the switch on us and say, fuck you, America, we're going to fuck your economy over and you'll crumble within months, which we would. They still need to feed their people and do what they're doing and supply energy and whatever. And I don't know their level of independence, and I don't know what their
Well, again, which is why I think that they've invested heavily Mexico and Africa. And, like, Africa is a real big continent.
Yeah,
a lot bigger than it even is made on the map.
With a lot of resources that people don't.
Resources, and they're tied into Europe, right? Like, it doesn't get talked about a lot, but they are tied into different parts of Europe. I think that if China did flip the switch on us, they'd probably be fine. Also, here's the other thing: China doesn't necessarily care if they kill a few of their own people.
They do have that.
So
their willingness to throw death and misery at a greater good. I said those words, God, but that's what they're thinking, right? It's right. Okay. It's for the country, so people are suffering, people are starving, people are committing suicide, but
it'll be fine.
Yeah, we got a lot of people, so we can throw more people at it. Yeah. Okay, we took a dark turn. Yeah, and it's not going to get better.
Well, we'll skip this and we'll go to this. PGA LIV Golf.
Yes.
Man, this one caught a lot of people by surprise. Definitely caught me by surprise. PGA Tour came out, made a real big say, "Oh no, LIV Golf. If you're a PGA golfer, you go to LIV Golf. You're not going to be able to golf in PGA events, and don't chase the money. They're bad people, and blah 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 blah." You've got these golfers in the PGA that came out and took very strong stances against LIV Golf because they're a Saudi-owned company. That the Saudis have terrible human rights. You've got connections to 9/11, Khashoggi, all just laundry list, right? Just pages and pages. PGA comes all indignant about how screw LIV Golf. Then LIV Golf's like, well, for what does $250 million or whatever the absurd price that they paid, and PGA said that gets you everything. And PGA says, fine, great. We are now one company, and for all you golfers who didn't take the money, haha, you're stupid.
So I actually have an insider on this. I have a friend who's very into the golf world, and he said basically, and I specifically asked him this like 2 days ago because I was very curious about this. And my stance on the Saudi royal family is pretty well documented. I am not a fan. And I said, what's up? I mean, like, you were the guy jokingly... Phil Mickelson, I think, was the highest paid athlete in the world a year ago and won nothing. Because LIV paid him like $140 million. Or maybe it was more than that.
I think it was like $270 million.
Okay. It was
some insane number that he couldn't turn down because of all his gambling debts and everything else.
And so anyway, this guy and he said, basically, LIV and the PGA had a ton of shit going on in court, and the PGA just realized, we're not going to win. And even if we do win, we're going to lose in the long term. And the same reason I don't think the Saudis doing other shit because they can get away with it because they have tons of money, that happens in the courts too. So they just realized they had a losing battle. Now, that is a huge issue.
So I dug into that.
Okay.
And that's exactly right. So the issue was not just legal battle, but people don't understand what that means. Like, so you've got your legal fees, right? But then there were some issues that the PGA was looking. Now, look, this deal is not through the woodwork yet because they may not be able to get through the SEC because of antitrust reasons, right?
Okay.
Like, there's some big concerns. Like, and whenever I see these big mergers, the first thing I think of is antitrust. But antitrust has become very political. So it'll be curious to see how that works. But it was a combination of things. It was the legal fees. There were other fees involved that the PGA was getting hit with. There was the fact that essentially they were facing an uphill losing battle that they couldn't afford to maintain. But when you look at the numbers, what's funny is that, and I made this joke on Twitter, that like the NFL literally could have loaned the PGA the money from like 1 week of preseason commercial ads, right?
I didn't see. I usually follow the tweets from our show, which are.
But I mean, just the math on it is crazy, right? Like so, but the reality is, like, yes, like it was because the PGA realized, like, look, they're not going to win this in court. They can't afford to keep it up. Even if they could win it, they couldn't afford to do it. And so they buckled. But my issue is, you needed to figure that out way sooner than you did. And you cost guys a lot of fucking money that they may or may not be able to make up, right? Because at this point now, like, LIV's done what they needed to do. They made a few of the guys really rich, paying them obscene amounts of money, but now they don't need to do that because now they have the whole tour.
Right.
Right.
They have their tour. And then the other thing, and this is what Ethan, my friend that's the golf guru, told me, is they're still separate entities, but they're now not allowed to block each other. So something to that effect. So LIV still exists. People will still play on the LIV tour, but people who play on the LIV tour
didn't go anywhere. LIV, like, PGA still exists,
right? As does LIV, and as I forget the minor league.
And the PGA board is still the PGA board, except LIV has control over any investment and money that goes in and out of that board, right? Like, so yes, they're still separate, but LIV has control of the PGA. Right, like, so, like, people want to get down into the down and dirty and like, well, technically, these nuts. Technically, LIV runs
these nuts in there.
LIV runs the whole show. Like, there's no, like, people are trying to whitewash this to make it seem like, look, the dudes at the PGA took a fucking bath. And what I mean by that is they got all high and mighty. Then, they puffed their chest out and realized the person poking a finger back at the chest was way bigger, and they fucking folded like a tent. They gave them everything. Like all the separate entity stuff, barely even on paper, right? Okay. Liv runs the whole show. If that makes your buddy feel better, fine. Don't burst his bubble. I'll do it. Liv owns you. Sorry. That's just where it's at.
Well, I mean, essentially, you've got the royal family, which is essentially a government of a very wealthy country fighting against the Pro Golfers Association. So, as big as you want to say the PGA is, they ain't a country with more oil.
Well, and that's kind of the thing, right? Like the PGA, you're right. It's not a country, but the PGA also, like the NFL, could fight this fight if they wanted to, if they ever got into it. Not that they would.
Right? Yeah, you can't make that. Right. If suddenly Josh Allen and DeAndre Hopkins go play for the Riyadh.
Well, like just kind of like what Trump tried to do with the USFL in the 80s. Right, but I mean,
how'd that go?
Well, exactly. That's kind of my point, right? Like the NFL could fight this fight if they wanted to, if there was even a parallel. But Saudis never could, and it wouldn't. Like golf is different than the NFL in a lot of different ways. But it just showing you the disparity between the money that the NFL makes and the money that the PGA makes. Yeah, right. It's just.
And the PGA, there's plenty of money, but not NFL. Not NFL money.
But there's not nearly as many golfers, and you're only paying out a few of the guys at the top. Every week.
And the national audience is, I don't know what the national audience is for the NFL, but it's way bigger. If I walk down the street wearing a Phil Mickelson shirt, I'm not getting stopped
in the US, as much as I am. There's nothing bigger than the NFL on
correct.
TV.
You're correct.
There's not.
And by the way, the fight you just described happened in the 80s, and the NFL is so much financially stronger today than it was then.
Now, technically, the NFL lost that, but they only paid Donald Trump $1.
3. Punitive.
Oh, well,
it gets triplicated. Right. I remember this because there was a political cartoon.
But the original was just
$1 settlement, and then it gets paid because again, there's a political cartoon that was like all the NFL executives fighting over who gets to write the check, $3.00, and they're like fighting. No, I get to do it. No, I get to do it. So that was when cartoons still existed. All right, man. We should wrap this up fairly soon, but Pat Robertson passed away at the age of 93. I consider Pat Robertson to be a complete huckster. Like, there's people out there who are zealots, and I'm like, okay, I don't agree with you, but I think you believe what you're saying. I think what you're saying is nuts, but I think you believe it. And then there's complete hucksters. I would put Alex Jones and Rush Limbaugh and Pat Robertson all in that same category. They know what to say to get people to make them wealthy, and in their heart and even an inch below the surface, they're like, I'm full of shit. I know it. I can't believe they don't know it, but show me the money.
Pat Robertson leg pressed 2,000 pounds at the age of 86.
You put that on Twitter. I've seen that video in the past. That is my favorite video, one of my favorite videos of all time.
Me too. It's so ridiculous.
So let me paint the picture, because I love doing this.
Go ahead.
So Pat Robertson is, at the time, I would say in his upper 70s.
To be fair, he was in his 80s. It wasn't that long ago.
My apologies.
It really wasn't that long ago.
He then does a video where he's leg pressing, I would air quote
2,000 pounds.
2,000 pounds, which is more than any human ever? No. Okay, I know that. I mean, it was more. It was more. Let me paint the video. It's Pat Robertson in workout attire-ish stuff with a young, attractive black woman next to him, putting more and more weight on a leg press rack, going up to 2,000 pounds, and he then takes the weights off the rack, moves it about an inch, re-racks it, and says, I just leg pressed 2,000 pounds because God gave me the power to do it. Is that fair?
No, that's not quite
fair. By all means.
But it's close. Like, so they put a lot of weight on the bar, or on the leg press machine. Yep. It's not a rack. They put it on the leg press, and then they took some plates off because they weren't going to stay on when anything moved, right? But they claimed that had those stayed on, it would have been over 2,000 pounds. Taking those off, left it at 2,000 pounds. So then he undoes the safety, literally moves it 2 inches is being real generous, and then they lock it again, and then power of God compelled them to do this amazing feat of strength. It's hilarious. I on the one hand, as a weight room junkie rat guy, it is kind of cool and funny to see like the old guys do their feats of strength, even though they're not that great. You're like, all right, you're fine, you're old. Pat Robertson is a little bit different because I consider him more of a sinister character. Like he really sort of injected, like he was able to merge, right-wing conservative politics with religion. Right?
Yeah.
Like prior to Pat Robertson, especially like in the 80s, there wasn't as much like religion and God and everything else. But Pat Robertson found his way in.
He tried to run for president.
Yeah, he did. And then when it didn't happen for him as president, like he starts throwing endorsements around because he had a following, decent following.
Huge.
And like, the
700 Club, yep.
Has this huge following, right? Like, so then when he is out and realizes that it's not enough for him to become president, right? He endorses Reagan, right? Gets behind Reagan and gets his whole 700 Club behind Reagan and the crew.
Yeah.
And then becomes an integral part of spreading Reagan's message, throughout the evangelical masses, and that becomes just the norm, marrying the Republican Party with that crowd, where that crowd had generally stayed out of politics, and whether you were right or left, you were a sinner. And now it was, well, the people on the left are sinners and the people on the right aren't, even though they blatantly are, but they're willing to just ignore it. So then you're just like, oh, so all of you are full of shit. But, and Pat Robertson, did a lot of things, like you said, that were bullshit. He knew that they were bullshit, but it made him extremely wealthy, private jets, like him explaining why it was okay for him to have his private jets and all that other stuff to spread the word of the Lord and all that other stuff. Like, it's comical. There's a show on HBO called The Righteous Gemstones with John Goodman and
Danny McBride.
The show is hilarious, but they're clearly making fun of, all of these types of people. But Pat Robertson is the OG of this, really, to a degree. And so I think they took, what would you get if you took Pat Robertson and Joel Osteen, right? Well, you would get apparently John Goodman and Danny McBride. But it's a good show that sort of documents the bullshit that these people are throwing out there. And like I said, Pat Robertson, I consider him a bad guy, but I didn't really want to even get into that. I just wanted to talk about the stupid video with him like cussing. I wish we were on YouTube so we could actually show it and laugh and make fun of it. But he died, so that happened.
And I feel the need to call out like who is a scammer and who is a true believer. Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson were basically 1A and 1B in terms of evangelical voices in America. I think Falwell believed his bullshit, though. Falwell went on tours where he made relatively little money with Larry Flint and talked, had conversations. He was not afraid of public discussion.
Larry Falwell is actually not a good
Larry
example.
Falwell. Jerry Falwell.
Sorry. I was thinking of Larry David for some reason. You said, let's get like Larry Flint, Jerry, whatever. Falwell, different. Falwell's son, grifter.
100%.
Falwell's son,
100%.
grifter.
100%.
The original. I agree with you there.
Yeah,
believe what he was saying.
Yeah, I mean,
right. And he wasn't that bad. Like it was just he was very religious, right?
Sure.
And so it's just like okay, but
and he kind of became a public figure by default because Larry Flint caused that problem that led to them becoming co-debaters and friends. And that's back to your point about no civil discussion. Those two men. I mean, Larry Flint got shot by someone because they were a Jerry Falwell believer. Larry Flint lost the ability to walk and have sex because of a Jerry Falwell believer. And yet Jerry Falwell, A, denounced the person doing that, and B, said, I'll stand side beside you on a stage, and we can discuss where we stand on political and moral issues.
Now, referencing the sex thing is important because Larry Flint starts Hustler magazine, which is
kind of part of his life.
Sex is a big part of the whole deal. I mean, Hugh Hefner, that whole thing. Not that Hugh Hefner was a great guy.
Right, so then there's that. All right, let's wrap it up on that. We are at Whiskey Congress on Instagram and Twitter. Thank you for listening. We're done.